Hi, Jana, are you in yet?
Yes, hi.
Amazing. Okay, cool. I think we can hear you loud and clear. That's cool. Thanks so much. Yes, so we're just waiting for everyone to join, and we will start the session at 17:30 sharp.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone,
Hello.
and welcome to the Climate Justice Action Accelerator, organized by the Generation Climate Europe. We are incredibly pleased to have all of you joining us today for the event. I know it must be a busy evening, and I'm so glad that you could all make it to the meeting. Please note that this meeting will be live streamed on YouTube, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel, as well as on our YouTube channel after the meeting is concluded. My name is Sakshi Krishna, and I will be your co-host for today alongside my colleague, Lara. As a project officer for the organization and logistic team on COP28 at Generation Climate Europe, I have been closely involved in planning events and activities on the road to COP28. I hand it over to my colleague, Lara, to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Super excited that you could all make it and super excited to be here. My name is Lara Schade and I'm the project lead of the organization logistics team at COP28. And I've been working alongside with the project officers and our coordinators to oversee the activities on the road to COP28 at GCE. And I'm also part of the steering committee at the Children and Youth Pavilion at COP28, and therefore plan a lot of events that will be happening there. And yeah, I'm super excited to have you all here.
Great. So we have a super packed schedule, and the session will go on for an hour. We will begin with a small introduction about GCE, and we will go into the speakers, and then we will dive into the Q&A right at the end. So please feel free to drop in your questions for the speakers in the chat, as well as on the chat on YouTube, which is will be taken up by the speakers at the end. So please feel free to drop in where you're from and introduce yourself in the chat as well. So I'd quickly like to go over the agenda for a bit. So we will be going ahead with the first speaker. That is, after that, we are done with the introduction about GCE and giving you a little overview about the organization. We will be diving in with our first speaker, that is Cherub Shoy. And then we will be going ahead with the second speaker, that is Jana Janal. And then we'll be diving into the third speaker, that is Shirsa. Unfortunately, we're sad to announce that Nathan will not be joining us today due to some unfortunate incident, but I hope that this gives you extra time to involve with the other speakers who are here today, and you could also engage with them at the end with the Q&A. So please feel free to drop in all your questions and all your introductions in the chat for the speakers and for us to hear from the lovely people.
All right, Sakshi, I'm just quickly going to get the slides back online because Gabby seems to have some issues. So I'm going to share the screen. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, amazing. 1 second. Yes. So wait, 1 second, please. Now I got it. Okay. All right. Before we start, we have a couple of rules of engagement that I would just quickly to lead you all through. So I think the first thing and the most important thing is quite obvious. As for a lot of people in the Zoom meeting, it would be great if everybody that is not speaking could keep themselves muted. And then apart from that, we would like that during the discussions, everybody is respectful, just to make sure that we have a nice and safe environment. We would also really appreciate, we have the Q&A session at the end. If you would speak up and ask the speakers your questions, that would be really great. You can also share them in the chat, by the way, so you don't forget them. And then I will make sure that they get read out and answered. And then, of course, it would be great as we have the discussion to actively listen to each other. And finally, at GCE, we embrace diversity. And so we would also like to make sure that this is one of the priorities in this meeting. And now, before we get started with the content in and of itself, I would quickly like to introduce GCE to all of you in case you don't know what the organization is, just so you know, like, whose event you're attending, so to say. So GCE is the largest coalition of youth-led networks at the European level of the networks that focus on climate issues. And so it's kind of a mission to really bring together all of the different amazing organizations that exist within Europe, and then to push for stronger action from the EU on climate and environmental issues. And in doing so, we have a couple of guiding principles, which you can see below. So we're youth-led, we're democratic, evidence-based, diverse, intersectional, and human rights-based. And here is just a quick overview of our amazing member organizations. I'm sure you know some of them. So just to summarize the numbers, we have a total of 381 national organizations who are present in 46 countries in Europe. And in doing so, we gather over 20 million young Europeans. And what we do at GCE is essentially three main things. The first thing is network engagement. So we connect all the different networks that exist within the EU and coordinate between them. We advocate for stronger action on the environment and climate policy within the EU. And we also focus on capacity building to really equip young people with the skills that they need in order to effectively advocate for stronger climate policies. So that was the quick introduction, and I'm also going to stop sharing the screen now, as we'll be starting with the panel.
All righty. Thank you so much for the introduction on GCE, Lara. Now, without further ado, I'd like to quickly introduce our first speaker for the evening, Cherub. Cherub is the first Africa Just Energy Circle mobilizer. Cherub Soy is the SDG 7 Global Ambassador for Youth at Sea for All and part of HERO's Africa Just Energy Transition Circle. Her blog, Eco Warrior Kenya, is an embodiment of her efforts to raise awareness of the climate knowledge gaps within her society and the world at large. She uses storytelling through her blog to translate the technical aspects of energy sector to advocate for universal energy access to young people and audiences outside of this sector. She's particularly keen on emission reductions as reflected in her past and present roles, with a focus on the energy sector, and believes that the achievement of a net zero future requires climate ambition from all fronts. Cherub will be taking us through the concept of understanding climate justice for today. Over to you, Cherub.
Thank you so much, Sakshi, and thank you everyone for making time to join this very crucial conversation this evening or today, wherever you are from the world. So according to me, climate justice is founded on the principle of reducing inequalities, especially as we respond to the effects of climate changes, but in a fair and equitable manner. I guess oftentimes when we speak of climate justice, our minds go straight into comparing the disparities that exist in the different regions with the different levels of preparedness and the different intensities in which climate hazards have had on the people and communities. But climate justice really gets brought out very clearly when we discuss the global North and South divide. Today, I will attempt to paint a clearer picture on how these play out in the two different contexts of the global North and global South. And I will start with the global South, where I'm from. So by definition, the global South is not just about like the countries that are found on the southern hemisphere of the globe, but it's more the group of countries and regions that are deemed to have lower levels of economic development, and they sort of have similar challenges when it comes to social, political, and sometimes economical challenges. When talking about climate justice in the global south, I would like to focus on rectifying the inequalities that are related to climate change impacts, and to also address the unique vulnerabilities faced by these regions in the South, which most oftentimes they are termed nature rich and cash poor, which is a very, very bad paradox to be in, kind of. I mean, the nature rich is the good bit, but the cash poor is something that needs to be elevated, and also to tap into the richness of the nature that the regions have to enable to kind of like ameliorate the situation in terms of the cash poverty. In climate justice in the global south would really start off by gaining financial assistance, and a lot of finance is required, as well as technological transfer to support the climate mitigation and adaptation efforts within the region. Resourcing for adaptation needs is something that needs to be tapped into, because if we cannot adapt to the climate change hazards and climate change disasters, then we have much more to like, it costs us a lot more. So with the resourcing for adaptation needs, these countries, we need to build resilience. And I am a very vocal advocate for energy. And I say this because I believe that energy is almost like the fourth basic need after food, shelter, and clothing. Because once you can power your household and once you can power your communities, then you can be able to power your economic hubs and your industries. And that way you can be in a better position to raise your GDP and to feed your economy when it comes to like agricultural industries and so on and so forth. So I feel like energy encompasses and transcends very many different strands of the society, and in a good way. So tapping into clean energy to reduce these emissions is key in the climate justice discussion. I would say that the last bit is advocacy. And this is where I've seen young people be very vocal and very passionate and actionable when it comes to climate advocacy. And advocacy is crucial to ensure that the voices and the concerns of these countries are amplified and heard and taken into account, and we can hold governments and industry leaders and policymakers accountable on the policies on how to make it better in terms of addressing climate change and effects. So solving these injustices involves a lot of cooperation, not just on a regional scale, but also on an international scale, in order to provide that financial support that is required, that technological transfer that is needed, and the policies to promote the equitable and sustainable development while safeguarding the rights and well-being of vulnerable populations. But when it comes to the global north, the conversation is usually more pointing of fingers. And in a way, it is right to say that the global north has significantly contributed to the greenhouse gas emissions, and in a way they do have more resources to adapt to climate change, but it's also important to underline that they still face their own set of climate justice issues. And if I were to paint a picture, I would say, in starting off from the shift from the fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, then in the global north, this can lead to job displacement in traditional industries. And if we were to do a quick 360 turnover and a shift 100% to renewable energy sources, the conversation in climate justice is to rethink where would these jobs that have been displaced and how can we move these jobs displacement to prepare the workforce towards a renewable energy sector, for 100% renewable energy sector powered region. So with another example, I would say, of climate justice in the global north would be, there are vulnerable communities. For example, there are low income neighborhoods in the big cities that are prone to heat waves. And if you can't afford to cool your home, then when a heat wave strikes, and we've seen in the past few months, there have been lots of heat waves across Europe and in the West. And then so that becomes a health issue, and you can't function and you can't go take your children to school. We also have coastal communities. So even if you are in a position to afford the cooling and whatnot, if you live in a coastal community, but you are at the front line of sea level rise, then that becomes a climate justice issue. There are also indigenous communities in the global north that are not also mentioned or talked about enough that face habitat loss. So all in all, we need global solidarity, especially regarding climate diplomacy. And in the global north countries, they have the responsibilities to assist the global south only based off of the fact that they are in the leading front in terms of emissions. So they should help the global south developing nations in mitigating and adapting to climate change, given the historical contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. And also the global north does have the ability to influence the efforts through climate finance if they have that financial muscle. And I would leave it at that and emphasize on the collaborative effects that each of the global north and the global south divide discussion is that each have a role to play and each can come together to collaborate to counter the climate change effects. Back to you, Sakshi, and I'm looking forward to having a very candid conversation with everyone on the panel and also online. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Jer, for your insights and kind of introducing us to the topic. We're going to go over to the next speaker now, which is going to be Jana Janal Arifai. And she is one of the 30 under 30 Arab Canadians. She's a climate justice organizer living in Windsor, Ontario. And she's also passionate about social change and the diverse voices that help lead it. She's also an organizer with the MENA Youth Network and Climate Strike Canada. And Jana is passionate about embedding the environment in a way that we build communities, cities, and the ways we live. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear you talk, Jana, about exploring climate justice in today's setting.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for the invite. I hope everybody can hear me well. I'm just recovering from a cold. So first off, I want to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement. I am a settler on this land that is the Three Fires Confederacy land, Ojibwe, the Dawa, and the Potawatomi, what we colloquially know as Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I come from a nation that has been colonized, that is currently being occupied by Russians, and yet I kind of, in a way, to get away from that, I've kind of participated in the same colonial cycle. I want to talk a little bit about what it is like to, what is environmental justice, what is climate justice, right? And I want to be careful of buzzwords. I want to be careful of all of the words that we've already heard, but have different meanings in different settings. One of them is climate justice, is environmental justice. What it means for something to be environmentally just in Canada is completely different than what it would like to be in like the global south or any area of that matter. And that is because environmental justice and injustice is built. It is not by chance, it is purposeful. We talk about things like what we call Cancer Alley in Louisiana in the United States. It's originally dubbed as Plantation Alley or Plantation Country. And it's located along the Mississippi River, and used to be where enslaved Africans were forced to labor. It was an industrial hub, but now was purposefully built. It was split by a highway. So that's inequality. And then we have about 150 oil refineries, plastics, and chemical facilities over there. So these people who live in what we know now as Cancer Alley are historically marginalized, are historically been disfranchised, and now face environmental consequences. They face disproportionately more cancer, more health issues, more health risks, and of course with that comes women, right? Within every racialization, within every disproportion, there's more. So women, queer people, and other racialized minorities usually face most of the environmental issues, and that is again built. If we think about it more between global north and global south, things like the conflict in the Middle East, that things like global south, all of these fighting and all of the, I guess, wars, if we think about it a little bit away from that, to see where the global north has put their military, where they have put their money, and where they have put their development, their energy, it's in extraction for resources, it's for oil, it's for the abuse and they're vying for other people's, oh, I forgot to put my timer, sorry. So they're vying for other people's resources, especially people who have been historically colonized. And that's why, I guess, there's that system, there's that logical flow. First, they started with the vying for resources, and that led to, they wanted riches, right? They wanted, so that led to colonialism, to exploration, to then slavery, and then not just slavery in the sense that we know in the global north, but slavery that happened all across the world, right? So it's always been about resources, it's always been about getting rich, it's always been about money. And this putting forward the resources instead of the people has what made us in the climate crisis that we are in right now, right? This is the cycle of injustice. The global north is not just a contributor because we provide or we have more, carbon offsets that we use more. It is because we have designed a system where we have the money and we have the resources and other people don't. Or if they do have the resources, we have made a system where they cannot effectively use it. And so the climate crisis is now, as the previous speaker mentioned, like people all around the world are currently reeling from different climate crises. I live in Windsor, Ontario. Windsor is like mild environment. We are wetland. We're not very much, we're just like a plain field. We had 2 tornadoes this summer. That is insane for this area to have this tornadoes. And of course, people, and it's really important to note that there is no black and white. There is no, these people get disadvantaged and these people don't. I live in a more affluent area. Even though I am a racialized person, I never had to, take flood water out of my basement. My friend who is not white, who is white, sorry, lives in a less affluent area who had to do that. So it's not so black and white, which brings me to my point, but where climate just kind of come from and where the word, the collaboration of the climate movement started, that is in solidarity and in labor unions, right? That didn't start so much in just the absolute want for a better environment, but it also came from the want for better labor, for better world, for this togetherness of community. So the previous speaker was talking about how disenfranchised people would be if we had this complete shift or this move away from fossil fuels, how some people will not have labors. And I would like to introduce the topic of a just transition. It is the idea that started in labor unions. A solution to climate justice is to, climate injustice is to move slowly away from this fossil fuels, this resource intensive society that we live in, slowly to prioritize people and to prioritize renewable energy. And we need to talk about theory of change. We're coming back from all across the world, right? From all across different areas. So I'm an environmental studies student. I work in climate, I work in built environment. Other people might come from finance. And we need people on all sorts of levels on the streets. We need them in offices. We need them, maybe as far removed from the environmental world as possible, but we still need them to be climate activists and climate champions in all aspects, because that is how change is created. We need to think about who gets access to what lands and resources and understandings and animals are being respected and values. We do, the idea of aesthetics. We are more like people, especially in the global north, sensationalize global south suffering and suffering of racialized minorities. Especially like, say, a good example, Morocco. After the recent earthquake in Morocco, people were like, oh my God, sharing pictures of destruction, especially with people in it. And it's like, you don't really need to see this picture to feel bad. But this picture and this, the look of distress has kind of worked on your emotions. And I think that's about like the aesthetics in our society and how we are kind of following the capitalism route of what looks interesting, what looks pretty, and what looks important to me. So a bug, for example, is less likely to be safe. People look at bugs and flies and they're like slapping them away, while they look at a penguin and they're like, oh my God, it's the cutest penguin. I have to work to save this penguin, while both have importance to their environment. Think about, I encourage everybody here to think about your community looks like, not just the people, but how it is built. Where is the urban sprawl? How are we using this land? How are we using our resources? So this, we need places. People are migrating away from places in climate crisis. They're moving to, say, urban hubs and cities. That and the cities can no longer contain ourselves. Like, we have not built it properly. We've not built upwards. We've built towards each other. And as we expand this urban sprawl, we are losing valuable agricultural land. We are losing areas we can make food. And that means we are using the soil in other places in farmland more and more. So now we have worse quality food, we have less food, and we have no places to go. And we are now clustered in cities with urban heat indexes. So let's look at what that is, and how our communities look like, and how that is contributing to the climate crisis, and how that is contributing to that works with how we are feeling as a community, how the disconnect, the hatred, the lack of transition to a better future, the hopelessness, all of that comes from our built environment and the deliberate moving away from people, the lack that they are trying to make us not stand together in solidarity. But the way to go is to community. The way to go is to work together. It is to change what we value as a society, from land and resources to people and love. And that is, that helps with, of course, money and infrastructure. The global north owes a lot to the global south, loss and damages, if not more. Especially, we owe people in the global north that we have harmed. And we talk a lot about, the global north did a lot of work. Capitalism did a lot of what is now the climate crisis. But at the end of the day, humanity is in charge. Humanity has lost, and whoever can and has the capacity to, in every way possible, need to start to work against this current of climate injustice. At the end of the day, there is harm that was created by humanity, and we must try to save it. And this might be a little bit morbid, but if we cannot save humanity, at least we save the animals and the nature and the land, whatever needs to be saved. And I will stop talking now. Thank you so much for letting me speak, and I hope you got something worthwhile.
Thank you so much for that, Jana. That was very well put. And I really agree that the point you were trying to make, climate crisis and climate movement is also a social issue. So I think we need to go out working on all fronts if we want to achieve climate justice. Thank you so much for the wonderful insights. And with that, I'd like to move forward with our next speaker, Shirsa Exton, to the panel, who will be talking about youth-led climate action. Shirsa is an 18-year-old climate justice activist from Limerick, Ireland. She began climate striking in 2019 when she founded her local branch of Fridays for Future global movement. Shirsa believes that restructuring our global economies is necessary to combat colonists' ideas of extractivism and exploitation towards the planet and people. In 2021, she was named one of the 100 inaugural winners of the RISE program for her work researching and rewriting Irish mythology to bring traditionally suppressed narratives about women and queer characters to the forefront. As a Gallego, I hope that I got that right, Irish language speaker, Shirsa believes that by reconnecting with our traditional languages and storytelling, we can reestablish the concept of Earth as sacred and create policy and practices that facilitate reciprocity with ecosystems. Shirsa is also the youngest member of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, and I'm really excited to hear from you, Shirsa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Eve, everyone. I'm going to be talking a lot about my experience with youth engagement and also my views on it in general. So my story starts in 2018, personally, when a referendum was held in Ireland on bodily autonomy. And I remember after the count, I apparently turned to my mother and I said I had had my feminist awakening. So I think from that point, I was really looking for something to be involved in, but I thought I had to be an adult to do that. And it wasn't until a couple of months later, when I saw videos of young people leading climate strikes in Australia, that I realized the potential we hold as young people, the strength and power we carry in our voices and our very presence in a room. We are both the future and the closest generation to future generations. In 2019, I began climate striking at the age of 13, as was aforementioned, and I was very much eager to make a change from this action. But sometimes, and since my beginning my activism, I have questioned whether young people should have to be activists, whether we should have to be in rooms and calling out leaders who have promised to protect us, whether we should have to grow up noticing these issues, whether it's from direct experiences or from learning about them because of our activism, and whether we should have to be the most radical voice in a room of voices that are not radical enough. How is it fair that young people have had to carry the burden of advocating for our future? Where is the meritocracy, the world of peace and abundance our leaders have promised us? I remember having my faith in my leaders ripped away from me over the years. And I think it's so heart-wrenching and terrifying at the age of 13 to realize how powerless you are in terms of how your leaders they care about profit more than they care about you. Since 2018, the climate movement has been led by people like me, people who have lived their whole adolescent lives in conference halls and spaces designed to ignore our voices. Part of the power of the movement comes from the fact that young people, against all odds, were standing up. We were lauded as change makers, told we were the future presidents, the future lawmakers and leaders. We were given awards and grants and media attention, all without pay. In economics, pay equates to efficiency and value. Unpaid work is seen as not creating any value. We young people sacrificed our schooling and free time to organize, to protest in order to hold those who should have protected us to account. We were creating value where we should not have had to create value, but we were and still are ignored in our work. The great tragedy of activism is that despite all the words praising you and all the action supposedly taken on your behalf, you are never rewarded for your work, for your sacrifice, for your time. At the age of 13, I felt as if the entire world was on my shoulders. I remember looking around and feeling depressed, feeling as if I alone could see beneath the rose-colored glasses that everyone else wore to something darker and deeper and dirtier beneath. It was isolating, and it still is, to feel as if you alone understand the reality of the world around you. Protest is a great remedy to hopelessness, and I think young people across the movement realize this. We held regular global strikes over the years and organized marches like the most recent one I attended in New York City, where 75,000 people called on leaders at the UN General Assembly to end fossil fuels. Over the years, we have gained attention as a movement because for the first time, as I said before, so many young people gathered on the streets. We have taken the traditional values of not being seen and not being heard and challenged it. We have become loud. We have walked away from school. We have demonstrated that most fearful emotion of anger. Young people hold a great potential. We hold all of our future qualifications and votes and experience all with us, but we also bring a fresh perspective to the spaces we are in. We should be valuable to decision makers, an untapped resource that makes them look good, as we are allowed to draft legislation that protects our futures and our lives, instead of relying on older people to decide for us. There is also that concept that as people grow older, they mellow out until their politics resembles that of their elders. How horrific that idea is, to have one's hope so dashed upon a rock that it bleeds out into acceptance of the status quo. But nevertheless, many young people still carry that hope. If it is a persistent force that lives within us, precisely because if we were not hopeful, we could not have the excuse of "I will be dead soon." However, This potential is useless if we are thrown into more advisory groups or more consultations or even youth parliaments that result in our words being consolidated into a toothless statement given to a decision maker by the most gentle among us while photos are snapped by waiting media. I personally do not see a role being slapped with the label of, slapped? Did I say snapped by waiting media? I personally do not see a role being slapped with the label of youth as being inherently inclusive. I think we need two things. We need to lower the voting age, as many countries have done, to 16. Young people are increasingly informed about the world around us. We should be able to have a say in our future. And the second thing, young people must not be treated as passive observers, but with a gravitas afforded to any other stakeholder or delegate. We might be young, but that should make us more qualified to speak in our future, not less so. This includes, as aforementioned, pay. Young people must be compensated for our work. Without pay, the accessibility of these kinds of positions immediately changes, and the ability of all youth to adequately contribute radically decreases. In all the work we do, particularly with institutions and organizations that are clearly paying their adult employees, we must demand pay. I hope I have today given you some small insight into the importance young people play and the reality of our situations within this movement. We have shaped change, but we are often sidelined from implementing it. Gurv Malgov.
All right, thank you so much, Sirosha, for sharing this very inspiring story, and also thank you to all the speakers in general. As we've mentioned before, Nathan is unfortunately not able to be here today, so we will go over to the discussion section now. If you have any questions that you would like to ask the speakers directly, you can raise your hand and then I will call upon you. In the meantime, I'm going to start with some questions that we've had in the chat as well. So the first question that we had was, I'm going to read it out. My question is, how can we champion climate smart agriculture to mitigate climate change and end food shortage in the global south? Make use of degraded land, mainly led by youth. I think this was a question that was directed to all the speakers, so whoever feels confident in answering this question about climate smart agriculture, feel free to jump in.
I can go for it. So thank you so much for your question, Newton. I am a daughter of farmers, and both my parents and for generations we've been farmers, and we've used farming and indigenous knowledge to like, we worship the land and the sun. That's our traditional religion. And so it is from a religious and spiritual aspect that we need to maintain the land. In terms of how you can champion climate smart agriculture, I always say that you should always start with what you have and where you are. You don't have to take it apart from a very high level standpoint. You start with what you have. And if it's, for me, how it started was in advocacy. I had a blog. I wrote about how sustainable agriculture and sustainable energy systems can be intertwined to increase productivity and to reduce food loss in my community in the Rift Valley in East Africa. So if that's the angle you want to take, it's advocacy, then you can champion it from that angle. If you do have a finance and a business aspect, you could start on by starting with a business plan, drafting out. There are so many mentorship opportunities that I know of that can help you get started, talk to the right people, start to fundraise and start with one project and scale. Or if you want to take a policy angle and you have local councils, depending on how the jurisdiction of the state or the land that you're from is structured, you can start with that. Yeah, I think for me, it's always you do what you can with what you have, and then you ramp it up as you go along. And there's a whole community out here. I mean, we have GCE, and they have a wide, like they said, introduction, they have a wide network of youth-led projects. We have the UN SG's advisory council. I'm sure they have someone from the region if they have projects like that. There's so many mentors on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Okay. Cherop, I'm also in East Africa. specifically Kenya, was in Gishu County. So I've tried it, but there's a problem with it. The problem is in order for me to advocate for it, many youth see it as an awkward thing, something of the past. They don't. I've tried a lot, but many of them are saying that better we do something else instead of agriculture. Agriculture is just useless. And for me, I know from my knowledge, I know that for any country to develop, we must champion, number one, agriculture. And we are facing the climate change. So we must relate it to agriculture. And that is through climate smart agriculture.
Thank you so much, Newton, for that contribution. I believe next was Axel, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. So please go ahead and ask your question.
You did. So my name is Axel Eriksson. I'm from Sweden. I'm one of the 2 Swedish youth delegates to the UN Climate Convention, also now to the UN Biodiversity Convention, where I also represent youth as a steering group member of Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And I was a bit interested in the title of the presentation given by Jana, which started with exploring the rising importance of climate justice. So my question basically relates to, is the importance of climate justice actually rising, or has it been, well, very high since forever, basically? And for me, like my perspective on, well, part of my perspective on climate justice is that there has been an increasing awareness about it, that we are starting to talk about the climate crisis in terms of a justice crisis. So I do think the awareness of climate justice, or rather the awareness of the term, is increasing. But yeah, it's a very open question. Maybe first of all to Jana, do you feel like the importance of climate justice is rising? And why?
I think you're correct in the sense that people are learning more about the term. I think a lot of people knew about justice. And one of the wonderful things about climate justice is that it encompasses all other forms of justice. So like Black Lives Matter, for example, has a very real place. The Palestinian movement has a very real place in climate justice. So I think we are increasingly aware of the amalgamation of all other types of justices into climate justice. And I also think that terms like the just transition are getting more popular post-COVID because of their variety of like just recovery. So you are correct in the sense that maybe it's been there all along, but it is not like an object. It is an ever-changing concept. And it, again, doesn't have the one definition we have as general understanding, but its implementation is different in each part of the world and each section. So, but that's a very important insight.
Thanks a lot. And I think next we have Muhammad. Also raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I hope can you hear me clearly, right? Yeah. So I was listening to the story of Sivasrak's section, and I was really interested and curious. Like there are so many youngster people around the world, like in their 80s, in their teenage, and above their 20s. And when they want to join each other, like there should be she said like she is like now a climate activist. So if we want to join her or join her platform from all around the world, like from different countries, like personally me, I belong to Pakistan, and by professionally I am also an environmentalist and working with the climate activist agency called Yango, but right now I'm continuing my masters in China. So giving back to the question to Sivasak section, that how like is it possible to make a platform for the youngsters that according to me, the most important things for us to awareness, to aware the people, aware our elders and our kids and other young generations, that how the climate change and this environment and Mother Earth and the resources we are getting from it, how much important is that, and how should we use it in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's not any one way to go about kind of creating these kind of platforms. I think it is very much based on where you are. Like, for example, it's going to be different in Ireland than it will be in China, very different. And it's difficult. So I don't really have like one answer for you. And to be honest, you know, the way that I started was just by going out and protesting. But there are many different ways. Like, you can create a program that you go into schools with, or you can talk to your community leaders and representatives. I just think the most important thing is to ensure, I think that the first step is to ensure that you are educated, and so that you can carry that information to both people that you know and the networks that you're already in. Yeah, I don't have one answer. It's complicated because there's so many different ways to go about this, and so many different ways to engage young people. I'd say, though, the way that I see it is, I think often in these kind of programs that people set up for young people, and set up by people who might not necessarily be young, they don't necessarily view young people as fully formed beings, and rather as kind of not as equals, if that makes sense. So I would say that in whatever you do, make sure that young people are given necessary training, are treated as equal to the adult members of whatever group you might create. As I mentioned before, you know, compensation and pay is a big thing, but also I've found often when young people enter into adult dominated spaces, it's like we're treated as less than, and we're not given the training, and we're not really told what's going on. It's sort of like this dual expectation of you won't know anything at all, but also you somehow know everything. So I think that's really important, to provide that training. So I don't have like one answer to you, and I'm sorry about that, because it is specific, and especially to, you know, what your government allows, for example. But I do think if you set up a group, it's really important to view young people as equals, not just in their capacity as young people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because some countries like our East Asia, specifically, I'm talking about the India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, like the subcontinent. Here, government policies and even their training about the environment, they are not so much concerned about it. They are much concerned about their border conflicts and the other things like that. Like personally, me, India, the city of Delhi is like in the number one now, is in the air pollution, and the biggest city in my country, Karachi, is also now worse air pollution. Like, we usually every winters we have a smoke problem, and so many people are getting affected by their health by the smoke, and they have like pink eye infection going on there because of the factory discharge. So even youngsters do the awareness through social media platforms, through strikes, but we sometimes it feels like we don't have the power to do it. We can give them knowledge, we can give them our ideas, but they have the actual power. They can make policies, and they can make people to do like, you have to follow these rules and regulations. So we can try by our side. Like you said, there's not a specific one answer. You were quite right. And personally, me, we can, I just think like we should make a good example for ourselves. Like, if you are going from a public place and someone is doing like throwing a trash on the walking road or something, you just tell them that you should not do it, or you just remove it by yourself. So it could happen that because of your good deed, they will realize that yeah, we should do it, this is our planet, and we should be clean, and in the use it for the sustainable manners. In my country, there is like a timber mafia. So it's like a very beautiful country with a lot of nature, trees and sceneries, but so many people are cutting the timber is a very expensive wood used for this furniture, and nobody like in my government is actually concerned about it. They are cutting the trees, and now this if I go there in 2018, I go there in 2020, and that place look totally different. There was no greenery, all the trees were gone for the sake of money. So what I think, it should be the government who should be really concerned about these environmental factors. We can guide them, we can share our ideas, but we do not have the power.
Thank you so much for that as well, that contribution. I think we have one more question from the chat, and it was for Cherub specifically, but also if somebody else wants to jump in here. And the question was, do you feel more connection is needed between youth and schools across the global north and youth in the global south? And how do you think this could be achieved?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Do I think there should be more connection between the schools in global north and global south? How can it be achieved? I think it's already happening. If I take a look at the New York Climate Week, the regional climate week in America, I saw very many different faces, and it's not just from one continent. I am assuming that some of them, because I could see from the list of names tagged there, they're from young people in schools. And if you also see like Fridays for Future strikes and the call for climate justice, they're mushrooming. Everybody's opening a chapter in their home. So I think that's already being achieved. In terms of schools, I don't know why you specifically chose schools. I think maybe you mean like in the education system also as well. Yes, I in my opinion, the education system should be tailored to address climate justice issues, because if people are striking and not going to school on Fridays, that means this is an important issue. And if they're young children and adolescent, pubescent teens in conference halls where they're not being paid, then clearly there is an issue there that needs to be addressed at across all levels, not just in schools, but also if the policymakers are doing their job, then the children will be in school and they will be focusing on other things. So yes, how can the connection also be fostered? In the age of technology, we do have social media, and I know from the TikTok trends and Instagram reels, it's very easy at the touch of a button, a click of a button. Yeah. I mean, look at us right now from different continents already talking about climate justice. So I think leveraging social media would be one avenue. Yeah,
and I suppose to answer you there, I'm actually educating in schools at the moment. I'm doing climate literacy. And one of the weeks that we do is on climate justice. But I suppose in Ireland, we don't really have enough kind of like, this is only a kind of a 10-week program that comes into schools, and I'm only doing it with transitioner students. So a lot of the schools are kind of very much disconnected when it comes to the climate crisis and climate emergency. And like very much disconnected in terms of climate justice as well. And that's kind of why I was asking the question, is that how, like, I was even trying to get many of the students to come on to this tonight or today, and all of them kind of rolled their eyes up to heaven, and I was like, oh my God, I'm just trying and get them to realize that they need to kind of scope out and hear from different people and chat and, you know, hear different perspectives and give them that opportunity, which is really important. But I suppose just I'd love to hear, say, you know, in schools, is there any way that they can connect other than just TikTok or anywhere online? Like, is it, you know, is there something that we could do within schools in Ireland particularly that would allow more connection to happen? You know, that we could kind of reach out to the government in Ireland and say, look, you know, we're going to be doing more topics on climate justice, potentially.
If I can just say very quickly from an Irish perspective, sorry. If I interrupted someone, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. There is a lot of work being done in terms of, I suppose the general issue I've seen anyway, from a local perspective, is the fact that the climate crisis is not injected into every subject. So there are actually increasingly more subjects in schools. There's a climate action short course, which is going to be at junior cert level very soon. There's also a second level subject. that is about climate action. So there is more eagerness, at least in countries like Ireland, but it's just a matter of, I think, really threading it through every single subject. So,
Exactly.
in I don't know, biology, we don't really look at the destruction of ecosystems. We don't look at ecocide. In even like, obviously it's in politics and society and economics, but it's so small that it's almost might as well not be there. And climate justice is certainly not discussed. So I think for me that's the most important thing, is ensuring that when we do discuss climate justice, it's not compartmentalized from other things. It's not part of a separate subject, but it's taken in all of its parts in every single subject. And that's really difficult to achieve, at least in Ireland. I don't know about anywhere else.
Yeah.
But, the national curriculum, whatever, NCCA, I don't know what the acronym is, but they change every like 15 years. So it is really difficult to achieve, but I think it does come through ingraining it in every subject.
Yeah. Thanks, Saoirse. Thanks, Sam, Sharap. Thank you, guys.
All right, so I think we have 2 more hands up. So let's go through those 2 last questions, and then we can be closing the session. So I think Axel had his hand up first, and then Marlon is going to have the final question.
Sounds good. So just to add to the need to actually add climate and biodiversity loss and so on at all subjects of school. I have been part of several consultations, especially in the Nordic countries, and that's one very recurring demand. So I think it's quite common among youth, at least in the context I usually am in, to have that particular demand. So I really agree with it. And my question to Shirsa, let me know if I pronounce your name correctly, it relates to kind of how to keep the engagement going when you have started a very passionate community advocating for stronger action on climate change. Because I know that sometimes one generation might be there like in the start, and then they might, due to other things in life, become less active afterwards. So how do you really keep the movement going in your experience? What has worked the best? And of course, before I forget, thanks to GC for arranging this fantastic webinar. I think it's been really great.
Thank you.
I would say that it's very difficult, because I do think with Fridays for the Future, obviously we saw with the pandemic that a lot of momentum was lost. People had more immediate concerns, and it is exhausting to, like, it's proven that empathy is exhausting. If you're more empathetic, if you're trying to be empathetic to everyone, you're just going to burn out very, very quickly. Obviously empathy is important, but it is also exhausting. So it is difficult when you have the fact of, locking yourself up to avoid getting COVID-19, that itself is exhausting. Trying to care about everyone else in your community, in your society, is exhausting. So I don't have one solution again. I do think, though, in terms of movements, I think it's difficult because, especially with Fridays for the Future, we received a lot of attention, a lot of support very early on. And I think that meant that we had the momentum, but we didn't necessarily organize it or structure it. So when we started to lose that momentum, we didn't really know what to do with ourselves or how to get it back. I don't know if you felt that, or anyone else has been involved in Fridays for the Future, but certainly at a national level and what I've seen at an international level, that seems to be a big issue. Like, we lost that momentum, and it's like, how do we actually get that back? I think one thing is increased delegation. So, for example, having people, like you said, like older people, supporting and training younger people, ensuring that their skills are passed down, sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing skills. It's really valuable, because it means that then when younger people who might go into spaces like COP for the first time, encountering all of these very exhausting things, it's not that same kind of cycle of like learning on the go, like that learning curve. They have that capacity building already, and there's a lot of capacity building available from different organizations. Like Care About Climate, I think, has something going on at the moment for COP28, but I think it's also like at a local level, like saying, it's someone's like onboarding, like saying, this is what we've done, this is how we did it, this is how we continue it. And I think I've seen that in some places be really successful. I also think somehow we need to capture that feeling of anger. I myself have felt that the thing that propels me is not necessarily hope, but I do have hope, but it's very slim at the moment. It's mostly my anger. It's mostly that kind of that fight for justice, that's what I want. It's the world that I want. It's the world I don't necessarily 100% believe is possible, but it's the world that I would like. And I think it's important to remind people of how the climate crisis, especially in the global north, because I feel like it's different for us because we haven't yet experienced something that is so obviously as a result of the climate crisis, especially for people who are willfully ignorant about the climate crisis. I think it's about relating it to their personal experience as well, talking about the fact that pandemics like COVID-19 will become more likely if we increase ecosystem or continue at the level of ecosystem destruction that we're experiencing, that we're participating in right now. I think it's about reminding people of the effects on their family members and their communities, on their homes. It's about saying, well, this city will be underwater by 2050. It's a little bit of fear mongering maybe, but also reminding people that this issue that seems like it's over there is also here. It's with all of us. And even though a lot of us in the global north particularly have not yet experienced the results of the climate crisis, we will experience it. We're beginning to experience it, and it will affect us. So I think it's about compassion rather than empathy. Empathy is really important, but how do we inspire compassion? How do we use people's self-preservation to ensure that they actually participate? I don't know. I don't have all the solutions. I'm still figuring it out very much myself. And it's really difficult. And I think, I don't know if any mass kind of revolutionary movement has really figured that out, especially in this world of this very violent, vicious media cycle. But I do think, like I said, the capacity building, skill sharing, while also educating people on how it will affect them. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Saoirse, for that answer. And then we have one final question. I realize we're a bit over time, but I don't want to cut Marlon off. So please go ahead and ask your question. You are still on mute.
Are you hearing me now? Yes. Yeah, I wanted to say I'm Marlon Muronzi. I'm from Zimbabwe, a vibrant environmentalist and youth climate change activist. I wanted to ask you a question, probably as a contribution. We are from Global South. We are not the biggest emitters, probably from the Global South. How best can we be able to find some financial support to carry out our climate literacy programs in Global South, specifically Zimbabwe, in Sub-Saharan Africa? Let me give a good example of what has been happening. We are unable to attend these conferences like COP27, COP26, COP21 because of financial support and financial limitations. I think and I assume that some of the organizations, they are trying to work on the idea of nepotism without making passionate about climate change, climate crisis. From the previous speaker who talked about passionate about climate change, we are so passionate about climate change, but we are lacking financial support. How best can you be able to access financial support as the babies or the upcoming youth organizations from Sub-Saharan Africa? Then the other thing is that how best we can do these things so that we can hold our governments and other corporates, such as transnational companies from other countries, specifically from Global North, to be accountable from the level of their emitting and causing climate crisis in Southern Africa. Because we are not able to attend this conference because of financial support, take our programs like climate leaders programs, carry out loss and damage programs to make our communities aware of climate change as a crisis. Because most of people in Southern Africa, they are not aware of what is climate change. They don't believe in climate change because they are not able to understand it. So we have got a lot of work to do in Southern Africa, specifically Zimbabwe, to say thank you very much.
Was there an exact question or was it more of a statement? And if there is a question, could you summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences?
I wanted to say, how best can you access some financial support as youth from Southern Africa, specifically in Zimbabwe, because this, I understand this webinar has been very, very fruitful. It has been very educative. So how can you best access some financial support and other programs like this one in webinars? Because of some of these youth in Southern Africa, they don't have access to data to attend this wonderful conference or webinars like this one. Thank you.
I can take that. Can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, Marlon, I mean, when you talk about that, it's unfair, isn't it? I've been in the climate space for quite some time, and I have contributed to shaping programs and events at the COP, but it's shocking that in the 5 years that I've been in this space, my very first attendance to the COP was COP28. When you come from the global south, it's not just about the financial challenges. There's so many hurdles that make it very difficult to participate. You're starting with the financial support, and once you get the financial support, you have to get accredited, and accreditation maybe from your government or from organizations is very hard to come by. And then on top of that, there's visa issues once you have your flight, accommodation, meals, so financial support laid down, then you get the denied stamped on your visa, and it just kind of makes it seem very difficult. There's so many hurdles we have to jump, and yeah, I get it. There are, and I so wish that Nathan was here to talk about the Youth Climate Justice Fund, and maybe we can have him on the next panel or something, because from my understanding of what it is, it's a youth-led fundraising that they can have micro grants to support different projects raising climate justice across the globe, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, I can drop a link to their website. The application's closed, but I think they've said that they'll have rounds of different applications. Yeah, I think those are my quick 2 cents reaction from your question, and yeah.
Thank you so much, Cherub. I think those were all the questions that we had today. So now we would just like to quickly share with you our closing remarks and also any upcoming events. So I'm going to share my screen again, and Sakshi is going to say goodbye to you.
I'd quickly like to say that from the bottom of my heart, I'm really grateful for the panelists to spare some time and share their insights on all the topics that we have put them across. And some of them were really inspiring. And I do acknowledge that Shirsa has an orange alert, and she still could manage to make it to the meeting. I'm so grateful for that. I'm sure the audience felt inspired, informed, and motivated to advocate for a just and equitable future for us all. Before we wrap up, I would like to quickly announce all our future events happening at GCE on the road to COP28. So on the 25th of October, we have the Systems Thinking Workshop, which is going to be an interactive session explaining the basics of systems thinking and what it's all going to be about, and also about systematic interventions. We also have professors from Erasmus University. I hope you could all join that event as well. And then sometime in the beginning of November, we have influencing the loss and damage climate negotiations for COP28 and beyond. So we'd likely to be exploring the concept of loss and damage and what to expect from loss and damage agreements at COP28. And we'd also be aligning loss and damage processes with the broader developmental and humanitarian aid action. And I hope you could all gain some insights on the whole concept of loss and damage, which is gaining more traction at the moment. And sometime in mid-November, we have a COP pub quiz, which is going to be a very fun quiz on the history of COP and the key challenges that we're going to be seeing this year. That is all with respect to the future events happening at GCE, hosted by the ONL team, that is the organization, the logistics team. And we really look forward to all of your participation in the future events with GCE. We'd quickly like to say that we highly appreciate all of your time, and please stay tuned for more updates on the events. we're really, really excited for all of our future events because our team has worked so hard to put together a bunch of events coming up. With that being said, I'd quickly like to say thank you and a big shout out to the whole team of GCE, especially our project lead, Lara, who's also co-hosting this call with me. I'm very grateful to you, Lara. And my ONL team members, without whom we wouldn't be able to put this event together. Huge thanks to Gabby, our moderator for the day and supporting the panel today because she's been supporting throughout with respect to the tech. And also a big shout out to Namir and Penny, who are our COP coordinators and have been amazing support throughout the event. And I highly appreciate all your participation in the event. Before I forget, I'd really like to thank all the speakers who could spare in the time and join in to share their insights as well. I highly appreciate all of your participation in the event and wish you a great rest of the day. So before I let you all go, I'd request all of you to quickly turn on your cameras so that we can quickly get a online selfie, if that's okay. We'd request all of you all to keep your videos on. Can we have everyone to turn on their videos, please? If that's okay. Okay, I have my first screen. I'm not quite sure how I do this. Okay, 3, 2, 1, say cheese. I'm not quite sure I got that. Lara, if you don't mind, could you also take a screenshot just in case we...
I already took one. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. So we go on to the next screen. I think that is everyone. And I'm so glad you could all make it to the meeting today and interact with our speakers as well. I hope you have a great rest of the day and hope to see you all soon, sometime in our events.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks a million. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Newton, you still had your hand up. Is there something urgent still?
Thank you, Lara.
I'm sorry. Like for Cherop, can you text me on Twitter?
I don't know if Cherub is still in the meeting.
Okay.
I'm sure we can do a follow-up email with all the social media handles of the speakers.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can reach out to her with your question.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.